And we will begin. So good morning, everyone. We're excited to have you all here today and welcome back to our first video session series called How To. We're excited to hear from our speakers. I'm LACI and I'm the project manager at Impactionable. Our mission is to create a community that values meaningful relationships and acts on the desire to make the world a better place. The purpose of our video sessions is to hear from social entrepreneurs and leaders in this space to speak to our community members and as a way for us to hear ideas and solve challenges for real world social entrepreneurs around the world. We're always looking to grow and learn from each other. Before I introduce our speakers, I would like each of you to introduce yourselves in 2 sentences or less so the speakers can have an idea of who they're speaking to. So I will start with Skyler. If you want to introduce yourself, a brief introduction.
Hello, my name is Skyler Mcguire. I am the social media intern at Impactionable, and just looking forward to listening to everything today.
Prosper.
Good evening. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, so I'm an Prosper Kachi. I'm an EdTech entrepreneur. We operate in West Africa, so I'm looking to learn a few new things on how to present a startup.
Thank you. And then I'm so sorry if I really butcher your name, but Waksiniku?
That's okay. It's Wasinke.
Wasinke, welcome.
Yes, I'm having a little connection trouble, but I'm the founder of a zebra design social impact venture that is tackling the issue of multi-generational poverty.
Very cool, thank you. And then Shivani is the CEO and co-founder of Impactionable, so for everyone on the call. Today's video session, as I said, is something new that we're doing. It is our how-to series, and we have with us today Program Manager Molly Crete and Interim Director Daniel Kawah from Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator, or LACI for short. They will share how to tell your founder or startup journey. They will share their insights of how to clearly and concisely articulate your value proposition to look competitive for programs and investors, and how to define the true problems and needs and how to set yourself up for success. So I'll turn it over to Molly and Daniel. So Molly, if you want to introduce yourself, and then Daniel.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, I'll just bring up our slides because it also has an introduction page right at the start. So thank you so much for having us here today. It's been such a pleasure getting to know Impactionable in the last few months or so, and we're so excited to be here today. So my name is Molly Crete, as Bora just mentioned. I'm the startup program manager here at LACI. So basically what I do is as soon as our startups get accepted into our various suite of programs, I act as a sort of a main point of contact for any of those founders that participate in our programs and just help manage our curriculum and sort of flow of the overall programs. And I'll kick it to Daniel.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody here on the call, wherever you are in the world. It's so nice to meet everyone, and I'm happy to be on this panel. My name is Daniel Kawah. I am the Interim Director of Incubation Services here at LACI. Basically, all of that basically means I oversee the 4 founder-facing programs that we have here at LACI. And similar to Molly, I handle the interactions and the experiences of all of our founders from onboarding all the way until the end when they leave LACI. And our goal is to make sure that we help them create a more inclusive green economy.
And we'll just give you a brief overview of sort of what that means. So LACI, Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator, is a nonprofit organization that's on a mission to building an inclusive green economy. And basically what we mean by that is we see opportunities within the community to inform, educate, and support underrepresented communities by building the green job force. So we have 3 sort of tech priorities that we focus on with the startups that we support, focused on zero emissions transportation, clean energy solutions, and smart and sustainable cities. What can we do to create a circular economy? We structure our organization within 3 pillars: unlocking innovation, market transformation, and enhancing communities. Daniel and I sit within the unlocking innovation pillar. Basically, we are the most founder-facing but like team members within our organization. So we're really helping to support the startups along their journey. We also work with our executive and resident coaches, which are mentors that work with our startups along the way. And we do a lot of the kind of engagement while the startups are going through our program. Market transformation is really working to make the adoption of clean energy, clean tech into our everyday life by transforming the market. So they do that through public and private partnerships, as well as just understanding and figuring out sort of what's happening within the market and how we can support our founders and what we should be focused on. And then enhancing communities is the pillar that's really working through how do we bring workforce development into our programs? How do we support those from underrepresented communities, bringing that inclusivity into everything that we do? Just to give you sort of a little overview of the impact that we've had so far, we've been around since 2011, and through that timeframe, we've been able to support 236 startups, help them to raise over $500 million in funding, 272 in revenue, over 2,100 jobs created. So like I was saying, that inclusivity and bringing more individuals into the green workforce, and then supporting through what we've seen, maybe 470 long-term impact. So LACI is part of the part of a network, a clean tech network, and we've been ranked as the top 10 business incubator worldwide by UBI for the last 6 years. So really proud of the work that we're doing, and excited about the different startups we can support in LA. So to talk about what we're talking about today, we're looking at how do you share your startup journey, right? So I think we wanted to sort of take a step back and start with the basics. So in the chat, if you'd like to kind of participate with how I'm doing here, I'd love to see sort of your definitions of a founder, a startup, and how you would define your value proposition. For me, a startup is someone that a founder is someone that starts a business. They are someone that has an idea and they turn that idea into a reality. And either that's through a service or a actual physical product, but sort of came up with the idea and started it. Daniel, what's your definition of a founder?
Just to piggyback what you said, somebody who is trying to either create an original or enhance and innovate an existing product through a service or product that they're trying to offer for a cost and for a profit. I think the overarching thing is trying to solve a problem, right? You see a problem in the marketplace and you have a solution that solves that problem through business.
Perfect. Very nicely said. If anyone else has any other interpretations, feel free to add it into the chat or let us know. And then to move a little bit further, obviously I used a pretty well-known example looking at Elon Musk. We know that he's a founder not only of Tesla, but other ventures. But if we're focused on clean tech and we're focused on zero emissions delivery, I wanted to use that as an example that kind of can work throughout all of this. So then we think about, how do you define a startup? If a founder is someone that founds and establishes a company solving a problem, then the startup is going to be the business that they build around it, right? I think startup can be a little bit different than like a small business, just by looking at the different ecosystem, right? Startups are usually very lean. There's maybe 1, 2, 3 people on the team. They usually don't have a lot of capital to start, but that's what they're doing to continue to validate their products so that they can raise capital, so that they can continue to grow. And then, as they get bigger and bigger, the startup sort of changes from, a small startup into a full-fledged business, whether that's being, a publicly recognized company, or they're sold or, used in different facets. And anything else you wanted to add? Yeah, go for it.
And I would add on to that. I usually like to cap a startup at the 5-year mark. Some of my professors or people in the industry like to cap it even at 3 years. But I think anything after 5 years, you kind of have an idea if you are going to be a small business or not, right? And or if you're going to be able to scale and what that looks like. But up till the 5-year point, you're still trying to prove that you have proof of concept. You're still trying to prove that you have value and that you can capture some of the market. And so it's fine calling your company or your business a startup. But after about year 5, you kind of have 2 to 3 years, 4 years of information and data that kind of shows you what your company is probably going to be for the future. And so that's when you either transition to a scalable startup, a new venture, or you just simply become a small business, and which is fine, or a boutique lifestyle company. There's a lot of different ways you can go after you mature from the startup space. But usually a startup, like Molly said, is coming from a founder. You're very lean, no more than 3 to 4 people. Sometimes you're pre-revenue, or sometimes you're even able to make some money, but you're still trying to figure it out, doing a lot of R&D and customer discovery.
Yeah, I love that sort of 5-year mark, because I think at the end of that too, when we talk about being lean and, you talk about innovators as founders, they could potentially be onto the next idea after 5 years, right? So it's just such an interchangeable ecosystem. And, as the companies develop, that's sort of a great benchmark to sort of see where you're at after 5 years. The third question I added here was, how do you define a value proposition? I think when you're talking about telling your founder story, you got to be able to define what the value is of your story, or of your company, of your product. So I think this is the biggest thing that we see when we talk to founders that are coming into our program. Daniel can give examples from his past experience as an entrepreneur himself. This is the crucial piece of information that you're going to need to be able to nail down so that you can talk to anyone. I don't know if you've sort of heard the phrase or the terminology of an elevator pitch. You should be able to define your value proposition within 30 seconds or less, and the person would be able to understand what you're saying by the end of those 30 seconds. So the next, I will tell you a little bit more about how we see that when we look at startups, but just looking right here and reading what Tesla's value proposition is. Regarding automobiles, Tesla's value proposition includes a greener solution that adds high performance design, functionality, efficiency, long range, flexible, and low cost recharging. By the end of the day there, I can understand what they want to do, what their main mission is, and how they're going to plan to solve that.
And also the other part about that, to piggyback on that, is where they're going to be in the market. As you try to understand your market, or where you fit in your market and how you will capture market share, your value proposition becomes your almost lighting, your North Star, right? It's kind of guiding you as you are trying to get more and more of that pie or piece of the pie in the market. You will lean on your value propositions. And for especially, as we talk about founders and startups, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper, your value proposition goes along with your business as well as you as a founder, right? So it's also what makes you unique as a founder or your team to be able to pull off this business or this venture. Some people call it a special sauce, special recipe, but it also should be baked into your value proposition, right? As you present your business or present yourself as a founder, what makes you the unique person, or the one, or the people to be pulling off this venture in this day and time? So I'll let
Yes, I love it. And I love what was added in the chat here by Dr. Klein, that a definition of a founder is someone who sees what others don't see. I love that, because I think, when you sit as a founder, you might see that there's a problem, and maybe we'll talk about things with your friends or your family, like, oh, this is just bothering me. But the founder is really the one that's going to take that into action, as it says in the definition here, by developing that venture, using the product or service that's going to actually provide the solution for that problem and move the needle forward. So thanks for adding that in there. So just to dive a little bit deeper, as we've said already, there's kind of 2 different perspectives here. And that's why I asked Daniel to join me, because we're looking at startups that want to join our suite of programs. We take a small portion of equity in some of our programs. So it's really a relationship that we're building here. We want to see that they're going to be able to scale, to grow, and we want to be able to know that we have the support system in order to help them do that. So there's a whole process that we go through to onboard startups. And one of the things that we do is we have an interview, we ask them to pitch, they send in their pitch deck, there's a whole sort of application. But from my perspective, from the incubator perspective on the programmatic side, we are also looking for these things so that we can support you, introduce you to investors, introduce you to different partners or potential opportunities. And so we want to make sure that you're also really honed in on what you're sharing. So these are just a couple of questions that I think about when I'm listening to a founder tell their story, that I think is so important to nail down. And so we sort of have like the incubator perspective, because I've, over the years, I've seen so many startups sort of pitch their story to me. And if I can't understand it by the end of the interview, we're not going to be able to support you moving forward. So I think it's just such an important thing to hone in on. And then, adding Daniel here too, who can provide his past experiences. He's started and operated many startups throughout his past. So we can share a little bit more about that. But one of the things, I just mentioned is, can you tell your company story? Can you tell what it does within 30 seconds or less? That elevator pitch, like if you can do it really quickly, succinctly, and by the end of the day, a third grader can understand what you're saying, then you've done your job. I think sometimes, especially with us in the clean tech space, our founders are so technical. They've come from engineering backgrounds. They're the one that actually built out the product. And sometimes they get lost in those technical pieces of the value proposition. And so if you can really, I don't want to say dumb it down, because what you're doing is incredible, but if you can really bring it to such a basic level that a third grader can understand what you're saying, it's going to be a lot better for you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
And to piggyback that, like I said, like Molly just said, I've started 5-6 companies, had a couple of exits. And from the founder side, one of the key bubbles on here is their passion. When you are telling your story, whether it's, and this passion is going to help you tell your story better. And if you're looking for venture capital, this is one of the things they're looking for in their team and their founders. But two, also as you're growing your team as an early stage startup, other eventual employees or co-founders are going to want to see that you are passionate about this idea, this solution, the community that you're trying to also serve and create this product for. So when you look at the product solution, people want to see that you're passionate about the solution that you're creating, and that you're able to connect with it in a way that, like I said, going back to what I said the previous slide, that you are the right person or the right team to be trying to solve this problem. And when we, I guess, go to another bubble here, when we talk about telling your story, it's like, how will you impact the community? Right now, when we look at 2021 and as we move forward in the 21st century, impact is going to be one of those things, whether it's direct or indirect, that it's going to need to be part of your story. When you talk about the communities that you are either sourcing your materials from, the communities that your product is connecting to, the workforce that we talked about earlier that you're hiring from, there's so many things that go into that impact. So being able to explain or tell that and connect it to your passion, it's so important, as investors are also looking for double and triple bottom lines now. Particularly with LACI, we work in that space looking for a triple bottom line. And so if you're not familiar with that term, we're looking for a financial, environmental, and social impact when we look at companies. And I think that also is now the new blueprint for a lot of venture capital as well as angel investors. They want to know that you're making more than just a product or providing more than just a service. And so being able to articulate that in a nice, clean, digestible way for an audience that does not know your product or does not know your service as well as you do, is a very quick way to get and gain traction. And like Molly said, if you think about the newspaper or magazines, they're writing for an audience that's in middle school, or a middle schooler should be able to digest and understand what you're saying. So similar to your pitch, or just your mission statements or your value proposition, all of these statements that you will be having externally, you want to make sure that if any random person is reading this, that they should be able to understand what you're saying and what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Daniel. And I feel like you sort of hit on everything here, right? So at the end of the day, investors, if we're thinking about it from that perspective, they're not just investing in the product or their service, they're investing in you. So the much that you can find a way to relate to these folks, we're all human, we all have different types of passion. So if you can show us that, but then also on the other side of it, one of these questions here says, do you as the founder have the right skills? You got to show us that you have the technical skills, or you have the right team that can fill in the gaps for what you can't do, so that we know that you're going to be the one that's going to make it happen. One of the things that we're looking for too in an incubator is we want to see that you're coachable. What we mean by that is we want to know that you can take advice, that that you're not the number one be all know all of everything, that you can really learn and want to learn. And that we know that you can find the right teammates to support that. So being able to sort of hit on all of these things when you're talking about your value proposition is just so important. And it's going to help you, this is just a nice sort of teaser or, outline for what you can include in that. And I love Daniel's point about impact, and especially with where we are in the world today. Obviously at LACI and actually Impactionable too, right? We're really looking at that environmental, social, and economic impact as core priorities that we care about. But I think it's so important in everything that we do now and how we can give back to our community, how our product or service is going to support the community and vice versa, right? How the community can support you. Workforce development is such a huge piece to building our economy and to making it sustain. So those are all really important things to
I'll just piggyback and add this quick 2 cents as we go into the next slide. One of the most important things as we talk about all of these things is, as Molly talked about, a founder, you having the skills, is being able to tell your story and how you connect to the community, and making sure that your story is personal. The more personal your story is, the more founders, venture capital, angel investors, or even other incubators will take interest in there, knowing that you are really connected and touching an emotional piece. And we'll see that in our next slide as Molly preps that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to give an example from someone that we work with. Camille Terry and Yvette Ellis are the two co-founders of a startup called ChargerHelp. And what they do is they provide sort of on-demand service for charging stations. I like to think of it as like a AAA for electric vehicles. So sometimes if you're an electric vehicle owner, you might have had this pain point happen already, but you could show up to a charging station and it would just not be working. And it's very, I forget what the terminology, like distance fatigue, or you're just nervous about not being able to find a charging station close by to you because you're running out of energy, your battery is dying, and the only way to charge it is through an electric charging station. So they actually have a team that goes to the charging stations to be able to support it, fix it, bring you sort of a to-go version of a charger in order to help you get to the next step. So but what they have is a really foolish idea. Someone's not doing it right now, so it's a novel idea. They have an incredible team, and they support their team. When Camille talks, and you'll hear it in just a second, we're going to actually give the chance to have you listen to her pitch. You could see her passion within the first 5 minutes of her conversation. So we just wanted to give you an example of someone that really does a great job of kind of succinctly telling their story, telling their pitch, so that it gets you hooked in, and it gives you, wants you to lean in and ask more questions. So I'm going to switch to a YouTube channel.
ChargerHelp, and will be presenting on behalf of ChargerHelp's pilot. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Camille Christina Terry, and I am the CEO and co-founder of ChargerHelp. So at ChargerHelp, we're putting people and stations back to work. 3 years ago, I started working for a network provider where I was responsible for installing electric vehicle charging stations here in the United States, as well as providing consultant services for the installation of those charging stations in Canada and Australia. And so while it was really easy to find electrical contractors to install these charging stations, when the charging stations went down, not only were we coming out of pocket a lot of money, but then I would have an electrical contractor that would go on site that didn't know how to download my app, or didn't even have an electric vehicle to actually test if the station was properly working. When I left that company, I realized that this issue wasn't just at our company. We actually have an industry-wide issue where there is a hole right inside of the workforce that's needed. So let's go on to the next slide. And so what I actually found out is that 20 to 35% of EVs can be found offline at any given moment. And that's coming from a lot of the utility pilot projects that has been run in the last 7 or so years. And not even that, stations can stay down for up to 30 days. So if you drive in an EV yourself, I'm pretty sure if you pulled up to a spot where no electricity came out. And for early adopters, that's fine. But when we talk about mass EV adoption, your mass crowd is not going to be okay with driving to an EV charging station and it not working, nonetheless, it being down for 30 days. Next slide, please. And so from there, this is where we come in. ChargerHelp, we have built a platform and an app that enables on-demand dispatch, where we're seeing that sometimes it takes up to 7 days to dispatch an electrical contractor. With our app, we're able to dispatch a technician within 2 to 3 hours. Where we see that it's taken up to 30 days to solve an issue, with our app, we're actually able to go ahead and solve that issue within 1 day. And so what we're most excited about, next slide, is that not only are we fixing an issue for this industry, we're doing that by providing a local workforce. We've been able to work with the Los Angeles Cleantech Incubator to train 60 technicians. And when we look at where we want to go next, it's really going to be about how do we expand this workforce outside of Southern California. Next slide, please. So that brings us to our pilot. So while we already have a pilot partner with TELUS Power, where we'll be able to further validate, right, our troubleshooting capability, our dispatch capability, but most importantly, how do you make sure that you have enough work for the right amount of technicians so that they have an equitable pay? Because at the end of the day, when we talk about scaling out this workforce and really allowing more people to be a part of this industry, we want to make sure that we're doing it in an equitable way. Next slide, please. And so at ChargerHelp, we're very excited to launch this pilot. While we do have a pilot partner, we currently have a seed round open. So if you are a part of a fund that is very interested in not only clean technology, but understanding the impact of actually helping folks in local communities to properly be a part of this industry, then please reach out to us. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. I mean, I think that pitch was 2-3 minutes long. She covered everything that I think we just talked about in the previous slide. I think she does such a really great job. And even I just noticed this, which I didn't notice the first time. We talked about sort of validating your founder's skills. Like, do you have the skills to show us that you can run this company, that you know the technology? And she does that kind of really shortly by telling her background and her experience of working in the industry. But also on her slides, she put LACI as a logo, Techstars, Startup Weekend, all those things. So just a really good example of sort of how you can tell your story, how you can hit on all the points. And I think just something important to note here, this was particularly for a pilot project that she was talking about, but that call to action at the end, right? You're going to change your deck, you're going to change your pitch to whatever type of person you're talking about. So knowing that your value proposition is always going to evolve and your founder story is always going to evolve is just something to keep in mind. So thank you so much. And I want to open the floor, and I saw Bora coming off mute. So hopefully we're still great on time, but we want to open it up and see if there's any questions.
Yes, of course. No, thank you so much. That was so great. And seeing that pitch was just like a great example as well, because sometimes we hear about it, but then actually seeing something that's done so perfectly well, it's like a different thing. So I just want to open up for Q&A first. I know we had a question in the chat. Let me go back to it, where the question was, does this include social impact ventures? His venture serves smart, sustainable cities by uplifting the people in the city at less cost and greater impact. So imagine the people in this tech innovation.
I would say yes, absolutely. Social impact ventures is definitely something that's included in the startup ecosystem. And it's something that we're continuing to learn and grow and expand on. Circular economy sort of as a sector, and as you think of smart, sustainable cities and how you can provide, solutions to the city of making things more efficient, or, just working with local cities to, move the needle forward and to be able to provide that impact. So I would say absolutely.
Okay, this is what's thinking. The reason why I put that question in there is because I've been involved in, I'm a social impact venture, but I've been involved in these tech design, pitch, development, and it just doesn't fit. It's crazy to me. Like hers, I mean, to me, that was so simple. Mm-hmm. You're an employee at a place that is not running well. You see how to fix it. Everything doesn't fit that clean flow like that. That flow was so set up, it's unbelievable to me. Mm-hmm. But sometimes social impact, it's not as, it involves partners, and I mean, I know you could just say partners, but it just doesn't seem to fit when you pitch into the people and they're expecting this kind of, they're used to a certain flow, I don't know. But anyway, that's why I put that in there. So I'm going to continue to follow up. But trust me, Yeah.
I will say these two things. So Molly talked about how many companies I started. So I've actually started about 7 throughout my life, and 5 out of the 7 are all social enterprises. And I will say, and of those 5, 3 were heavy tech based, right? And I think what you would want to do in still telling your story, whether you're in an accelerator or pitch competition that is heavy tech based, is show how the tech creates the impact, right? And so not when you talk about VC, and if you're trying to get cash, unless you're going to angel investors or impact investors, the reality is those, like the traditional VCs, are going to want 5, 10x, right? And so if you're not going to be able to capture that or show that with your financials, what you do though is show the impact on the people side, right? Or on the culture side or the social side. And having data to back that up. And so when you saw even Camille's pitch here, if you saw her first slide that wasn't her intro slide, she had hard numbers and data that showed how her company and the technology was going to change and impact, the industry. And then when you look on the workforce side, she was very intentional of how the social impact was going to be baked into her company. And so when we start talking about social impact or social enterprises, you have to be very intentional and direct of how the impact is baked into your company, but how still it affects your financials.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I still want to open up to the floor if anyone else has any questions, and then have a couple of questions, but just want to give the audience a chance. If anyone has questions, please either unmute yourself or just ask a question in the chat. But one of the questions that I do have waiting, if and anyone can hop on, interrupt me if you want to, but what trends or challenges have you seen, pre-COVID and post-COVID? Is there anything that's so different?
I will say, just in general, pre-COVID, there was just a force to try to fit squares into circles. And I think since COVID has happened and we moved into digital space, the reality is we have the ability, whether on the incubator or on the founder side, to pivot. And not being stuck in the archaic ways that we've been doing things, right? And I think there's been that opportunity. So similar to that quote, right? That the founder is the person who sees the opportunity, right? When everybody sees the problem. And when COVID came, we saw companies pivot, and some people who were never entrepreneurs saw an opportunity to get in the space of starting businesses, but also we're now connected to their communities in ways that they hadn't been able to prior to COVID. So they're able to sit for a second and really think about how their business or maybe an idea they had been sitting on is now going to fit in the world with COVID and post-COVID. And I think prior to that, people, one, maybe didn't have the time to just sit still and kind of think about those things. But 2, the reality is like Molly and I, we work for the same company, but we're on different coasts, right? And so when you think of putting your team together or telling your story or even the impact your company can have, you first want to think local, of course, but now because of internet, Zoom, right? We live in the Zoom age, right? You can now actually think outside of your community and how your company or your product will actually even have a bigger impact.
Yeah, and just to add on to that a little bit, I think that there's been such an influence on how to bring inclusivity and diversity into everything that we're doing and how that relates also to the impact. I think because we, like Daniel said, sort of had the opportunity to sit and realize how such a crazy situation that's totally out of our control can impact our community. So picking up on like how we can support that, but really giving more opportunities to those that might not be able to have those opportunities. So that's why at least, we're on that huge mission of building up the workforce, giving them the tools and the training to be able to contribute to society. But also I think, COVID, at some stages of the pandemic was our highest level of, or our lowest level of GHG emissions in the air. That's a big thing that we're doing with our companies, is eliminating the amount of carbon that's emitted into our air. So just being able to see that that was happening with such a sort of tragic situation, but capitalizing on that, figuring out how there's more opportunities to create, innovative solutions around something that's happening. So I think the pivot point that Daniel made is so crucial. I think things are just happening as a reaction to sort of what's happening within our society, but really keeping diversity and inclusion at the forefront there.
Love that. And I know, Thulia, do you have a question?
Yep, I do. Sorry, I just wanted, once Molly was done. So my question is, with the 3 minutes that is allocated when doing the pitch, and you have impact on different places. So it's a three-sided marketplace where there's an impact on service providers and impact on suppliers. How best would you recommend that you prioritize and position it such that it lands on the investors without really saying a lot?
Daniel, I see you are chatting off mute. Yeah.
I will be frank with you. 70% of investors don't care about your impact, right? And so the reality is, even as you prepare to invest, or pitch, it's being very aware of your audience, right? And what priorities do your audience have, right? So if it's an impact investor, or environmental impact investor, or social impact investor, you want to make sure your pitch is tailored to their emotional heartstring, right? What is going to move them to get you in the yes check column versus the no check column, right? And so as you tell this story, similar to Camille, you want to very early on identify what that problem is and how it's affecting both sides, right? And how then, as you move on to your solution, how your solution is also addressing these things. But when you talk about your solution, you want to talk about numbers, right? So you want that data in there. You want some analytics. So it's like, what are you saving? Whether it's like you talk about a marketplace. So it's like, are zero emissions? So your delivery cars are only EVs, or you use recyclable packaging. But you want to really start being intentional of how you plug those things into your pitch, because you only have 3 to 5 minutes. And then as you start talking about your financials, you want to show, one, that it's profitable, right? Because if you're not profitable, you're a hobby, not a business, right? And then two, how does that impact that financials, right? Still affect your impact. Because investors still, even if it's a 3X, they want to know that they're going to be able to get their money back at some point in time. And so as you talk about impact, the impact still has to be connected to your financials and the growth capability of your company if you're looking for investments. And the other thing about this, and maybe we'll have this later on in the conversation, not all companies need to be looking for investment, right? And that's also another conversation you and your team need to be having, right? It's like, can we grow this over time just using our recurring revenue and reinvesting it into our company, or do we have to go get debt? And so that's also a conversation to have as your team as you start looking more and more of where you fit in the ecosystem, this overall ecosystem of either whether social impact or just small businesses overall.
Totally. I think you nailed it right on the head, Daniel. Thanks so much for giving that full overview. I'll just add, and it kind of goes back to Federico's question in the chat here too. You got to be tailored to who you're speaking to. So if you're talking to an investment banker, then you're going to put a lot more numbers on your slides, and you're going to talk about, the numbers of where you are and how you're going to scale. But if you're talking to an impact investor, which they do exist, then you're going to focus on that impact. And then obviously you're going to use the numbers to show and validate that your product works. There was one thing on one of the questions that we had for kind of defining your value proposition is, what are your customers saying? You need to survey the people that are going to actually buy your product, right? You need to see that they are going to buy it. You need to see what they're saying about it and really use their feedback in order to reiterate your product, in order to, find different ways to enhance it, make it better. But I also think that telling the impact can start with your story. Like Camille was walking through how she worked within the industry, and she saw that there was a problem, but she also has, a big passion for workforce development, and seeing how this particular problem could solve a need for those that, you know, needed a job by just filling in that kind of technician position. So she kind of came at it from her perspective of, you know, just loving her community, wanting to get back at it, but using that through like her own individual founder story and her background of how she got there. So maybe that's where you kind of include your impact, but then you use the numbers and where you're going to scale, and always making sure at the end of the day to ask for that call to action. You know, Camille like very succinctly said it, that I'm, you know, doing this pilot project. I have a partner already in place that I am going to make it happen, but I want this to further validate what I'm doing, and I need your help to do it. So I'm asking for this much money in order to do it. Or I'm looking for this type of investor that cares for this thing so that you can align with me. Because an investor, just like with LACI and our companies, it's a relationship that you're building. So it's got to work both ways. You need to also agree with the investors and what their sort of passions and their missions are. And I think that you're able to do that by really doing your research before you get those conversations. And then the elevator pitch is just like being able to tell your needs to anybody and everyone. So there's definitely different ways that you think about how you're pitching.
Yeah, and I guess to piggyback on that and to also answer the other question that's in here as well too, you know, when you're trying to pitch, especially ed tech to a university, I would say different than a research firm, you just want to think about the barriers that the university may have, whether it's a public or private institution, you know, who at the university that you're pitching it to, right? So whether it's a professor, whether it's head of a department, each one of these people are going to be different decision makers. And so you want to be mindful, you know, not to waste your time in pitching to the wrong person, right? So whether it's like sending your deck ahead of time, just to get some type of feedback. So when you do set up a meeting, it's with the right person. But when you're telling your story, this is where the impact, but also as you're looking for a partner, your pitch is a little bit different, right? Because your ask is different. And so one, you want to show the work that you've already done ahead of time, so it doesn't seem like you're using this person. But then two, you also want to highlight what the value add of this partnership will be, right? And then lastly, you want to highlight what they do well, right? And say, you know, bring that into the conversation, and then wrap that up with what I said second, right? What is the value add of your relationship? Like Molly just said, all these things are relationships, right? And so nobody wants to feel used. Nobody wants to feel, you know, less than in the trade-offs. And so as you are not necessarily looking for a financial partner or a sponsor, but you're looking for somebody to either give you support or feedback on the data side, there has to be some type of trade-off on for you as well that you're going to offer, be able to give them as well.
Yes. So such a good answer. And I want to go back to the barriers piece too. I think especially with universities and school systems, you need to show them that it's super easy for them to adopt, right? That it's like you're making it so simple for them to be able to just pick this up and use it, because they're busy. You know, they have a million other things that they're worried about. I just think especially with school systems, like they probably are getting approached by different tech solutions all the time. So finding a way to like use their school as an example of like, this is how I've done it maybe in the past, but this is how I can truly help your school and your constituents by, you know, doing the research of kind of what their makeup is. But just already calling out what you know is going to be their barrier, their, you know, the pain point for them, and saying, you know, immediately, like, I'm just going to cut that pain point right away and be able to solve it with this solution, I think is the best way to approach it.
And not to say we set this up on perfect, but it goes really back into our elevator pitch and the unique value proposition, right? So when you're talking to a university, and they also are doing their own internal research of looking for people to partner with, without even the unsolicited reaching out. So you have to very, very quickly and easily explain your unique value proposition and what makes you a unique partner for them to work with. You know, I just recently graduated from the University of Southern California, USC in LA. And as I ran the incubator there for 2 years, and literally my email box was full daily of people, you know, with opportunities, and you get overwhelmed. And so unless you're able to have everything from like a catchy headline to your email, all the way down to, like I said, having a unique value proposition that is clearly stated, that makes me want to reach back out to you on Slack or any other email or whatever it is. I think that's the thing that's going to help you make those relationships, and also be aware that the first attempt to reach out to them may not be the right time. So you have to be okay with finding out their cadence as a company, or as a university or as a firm, of when they onboard, new partners. That's something to think about as well. So looking at their calendar and figuring out when's the best time to reach out, and get on their eyes, right? And so when you think of universities, summer is usually a slow period, right? So there's usually a time for them to readjust their curriculum, maybe look at their partners, make decisions. But if you're reaching out in the fall or in the spring, when they're like, knee deep in the work, it's going to be a lot harder to get that relationship or get that introduction that you may be looking for.
That's such a good point. And I think that you can probably be pretty strategic in timeline for universities. It's pretty standard of how that schedule works, but figuring out the cadence is such a great way to approach it, and getting in that sweet spot of when that they have that low time. The other thing I was just going to mention is, maybe it's obvious, but building your network, and we call it like a warm introduction or a warm lead, right? But that's because someone is a part of, an accelerator program or incubator program or something like that. We're such a great ecosystem to support you and to make those introductions. But any other way that you can build that network to, find connections on LinkedIn, I think is such a great source, and which is perfect timing. Thank you, Bora. You guys are welcome to find us on LinkedIn at any time for any follow-up questions. But I'm such a firm believer in building your network, and it's not always about what it's about who you know. And we're definitely a resource to be able to do that. If you have questions for us, we're constantly building our network and finding different ways to connect founders to founders and all those types of things. So happy to be that resource for you as well.
I love that. I kind of just want to end with one question, because like we mentioned, like with post-COVID, so many entrepreneurs came up, and I bet y'all are flooded with like so many ideas and people who want to pitch ideas. And it just sometimes gets very overwhelming, because even being in, the social entrepreneur world myself, and like hearing other pitches, sometimes they can all just like mesh together. And you're just like, oh, like everything just sounds alike at some point. Like, how do I define which one is different? How do I differentiate them? So kind of like just giving the word of advice to individuals, either when they're reaching out or when they're starting to pitch deck, or how do they get started to even pitch, or who do they pitch to? What kind of advice do y'all have for individuals moving forward, or who are in the process right now, or who've been an entrepreneur for 3 years and don't know what they want to do, or they're not getting the right kind of audience or investors or partnerships? Like just the advice in general of what they can do.
I'll jump in first, and then I'd love Daniel to add a piece there too. I go back to the network. I think absolutely getting involved. Maybe it's not an incubator program or an accelerator program, but even looking with your different small business administration, like those types of free programs, free opportunities to get connected is a great way to start. And then I heard this piece of advice when you're like getting ready to pitch and you need to like nail it down, is we probably all have a friend, a sister, a brother, or a family member or something that like gives you the real, that tells you straight up, that doesn't sound good. I didn't like that. What are you even talking about? Like going to your toughest critic and practicing that pitch in front of them is such a good way for just to be like, no, that doesn't make sense at all. And then even like, I know we sort of jokingly said it before, but like try it with a third grader. Try telling what your business does to a young child and see if they figure it out. I think it's just a great way to do that, and practice recording yourself, watching yourself. It's terrible to do. I feel like you always hate hearing your own voice, but it's the best way in order to really nail down what you're doing, and then really using your network to support you in that, and just continuing to build that network by showing up to things like this. Like you guys did exactly the right thing by coming here today, and just involving yourselves with more opportunities within the industry that you really care about.
Yeah, couldn't say it any better. Literally just piggybacking everything Molly said. You guys are, ahead of your competitors already by, being here on a Sunday, I, like Molly said, we love the energy and the passion and the questions, and I'm really happy and thankful I got a chance to be here and talk to you guys today.
Perfect. No, thank you guys so much. We're reaching the end, so we're going to wrap up. This was a great discussion. I hope everyone learned a lot from this, especially starting your startup journey and how do you present that. So I have linked our social media on the chat, and also to sign up for our YouTube channel and our speakers LinkedIn. So sign up on, add them on LinkedIn, sign up on our website so you can stay up to date on kind of our jobs, our funding opportunities, and more video sessions that we have at Impactionable. In 2 weeks, we have our next video session featuring Hope Brinkmeyer on how to nail your interview. So hopefully y'all will sign up for that. And just thank you so much, Molly and Daniel. This was so great. And it was a pleasure meeting you both. So thank you everyone for joining our call.
You're welcome.
Pleasure being here. Yeah, thank you so much for the
You guys
invitation.
have a great Sunday and a good week this upcoming week.
Yeah.
Thank you.